I would assume that all three of you read or are aware of Max Boot's article yesterday in the New York Times. Could you comment a little bit on the statement that he made that said basically only by sending more personnel, military and civilian, can President Obama improve the Afghan government's performance, reverse the Taliban's gains, and prevent al-Qaeda's allies from regaining the ground they lost after 9/11? Could you
yes, sir. I'm glad to. I think Max. I respect Max. I think that he's right that where our troops are at the moment, that is, if you take our military forces and put them down in a certain area, neighborhood, they are able to pacify that area. I have great respect for our troops. The problem that we have is that the Coin Doctrine would require 265,000 American forces for this purpose, and we just simply don't have the troops to do that. And that's only for the South and the East, and that would be if we abandoned all the rest of Afghanistan. So the problem we have, sir, is that if we're going to sort of go big, then we have to be still more ambitious, because this idea of the gradual drip by drip by drip that we've been going through for the last few years, I'm afraid is actually producing more suicide terrorists than it's killing.
If I can comment, first of all, I have to take exception with the coin math that's being laid out here. It's not a requirement of one American soldier for every 50 of the population. It's a requirement for one counterinsurgent for every 50 of the population. And in counterinsurgents, we include American soldiers, we include the NATO forces that are operating, which are a significant number of troops, and we also include any effective indigenous forces that are operating. And in this case, there are about 100,000 troops in the Afghan National Army, and they are pretty darn effective. The Afghan National Police, I'm willing not to count because they're very corrupt and inefficient and so forth, although elements of them operate. That gets you up to about 200,000 right now. If you add 40,000 American troops, that gets you up to 240,000. We're planning to bring Afghan National Army, just Army, up to 134,000 by next year. That covers the gap. So the notion that this is not doable from the standpoint of the coin math, I respectfully disagree with that. But the key point in your question, which I really think needs to be emphasized, is that American troops and NATO troops affect governance at the local level, and they can affect governance at the national level too. And we saw this very clearly in Iraq. American forces engaged in counterinsurgency do not simply spend their time kicking down doors and pulling bad people out and shooting people. They also spend their time being eyes and ears on the ground, developing tremendous assets, especially for local intelligence, and in turn feeding that up the chain of command. And in Iraq, the model that I would give you for the role that the military can play in developing governance is how we curbed sectarian death squad activity supported by senior leaders within the Iraqi government, relying on intelligence that was developed by our soldiers on the ground and relying on those soldiers, those officers on the ground, brigade commanders, battalion commanders, sometimes company commanders, to address malign actors within their areas and then coordinate with senior leadership to address at the highest level. I believe that that approach can be modified to address the fact that it's not sectarian death squads in Afghanistan, it's abuse of power and corruption and so forth, to identify and put pressure on key malign actors to facilitate a governance program. But the military is an essential component of that, because without the military forces, you don't have the access to the population that you need to understand what's going on and affect it.
Dr. Pape, could you respond to the math?
Yes, sir. I think the best way is actually to do it in Iraq and Anbar, because we had a similar situation. You'll remember in Iraq, we had this huge problem, this insurgent out-of-control problem, right, especially in Anbar. We also had this whole debate about were we building an Iraqi army and so forth, and was it going to work and all that kind of stuff. But let's just look right at Anbar, sir. If you look at the chart about what actually changed in Anbar, between September 06 and September 08, I'm sure you've seen charts that the attacks went down against Americans. That definitely happened. Anbar definitely quieted down. The question is, why? First, American troops and the coalition did not actually increase their aggregate number of troops. We did put more troops in Iraq, but as others were leaving. So we essentially, in aggregate, came down. Second, if you look at the number of troops specifically in Anbar, they only go up a teeny tiny amount. The real change, and we would have needed 100,000 by coin doctrine, the real change occurred in the Sons of Iraq. That is, they went from 5,000 in September 06 to 100,000 in September 08. So, sir, yes, the coin math probably does work, and yes, locals can backfill, but we have to actually have real locals from the local area doing the heavy lifting. That's what we did in Anbar, and that actually worked quite successfully. And what my local empowerment strategy is calling for is to try to do the same thing to a large degree in the Pashtun areas of East and Southern Afghanistan. And let me also just add, sir, I was not against the idea of sending 20,000 troops to Baghdad in December 2006. I supported the idea here of what became called the surge in Baghdad, because there you had Sunnis killing Shia, Shia killing Sunnis. That's not what we have here in Afghanistan. We do not have Tajiks killing Pashtuns. We don't have Pashtuns killing, we don't have this big rivalry that way. What we basically have is an ideological battle occurring among the Pashtun South. And for that, it's very similar to Anbar. Anbar is our best analogy, not Baghdad. And this is what happened and what calmed down Anbar.